If you or someone you know is in a crisis now, please seek help immediately. Call 1-800-273-8225 to reach a 24-hour crisis center or dial 911 for immediate assistance.
Hello, world. My name is Tristan,
My name is Kimmy.
and you're now listening to Join
The Conversation Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Join the Conversation Podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Tristan.
My name is Kimmy.
And for today's episode, we have a very special guest. Introduce yourself, sir.
How you doing, guys? My name is T.
And what?
Why are you breathing so hard?
I just introduced myself how I thought that I should.
It's all right.
It's all good.
So before we jump into today's topic, I started. Before we jump into today's topic, here's a quick recap of last week's episode.
They don't really teach you how to communicate.
You mean more of a public speaking side, or
Public speaking and interviews for jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess.
Granted,
you can say that they don't prepare. Yeah. I get what you're going.
Because they expect you to just, right after high school, go into college.
So today's topic is based on mental illness, and before we jump into that, I want to give a quick definition of mental illness according to psychiatry.org. So mental illness is defined as a health condition involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. So T, being a African American male in America, how would you say growing up, being from Charleston, in your culturally wise, you've seen mental illness?
So, growing up, I didn't really experience a lot of people dealing with mental health issues until I got to know my cousin on my mom's side. He has schizophrenia, and at first they couldn't really detect what it was because like kids, they imagine things, they make believe, that kind of stuff. But like I started to realize as I got older and he got older that he was still kind of in that childish make believe state. And I was like, something really can't be right about that. And I went to my mom about it, and she told me that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but they don't really talk about it. Mm-hmm. Like his dad doesn't talk about it, his brothers don't talk about it, his mom doesn't talk about it. They just kind of dismiss it like it's not a thing. So growing up, like personally seeing that in the household and throughout my family, it's kind of something that's not really discussed, and people either ignore it or they blame it on other things. It's not really addressed at its core or treated. It's just like, oh, that's just how he is, that kind of thing. And I think that did warp my personal view on people dealing with mental health issues through high school. But once I got to college and I got to studying more things like that, it opened my eyes up to what it really is and the kind of solutions and treatments that you have to have in place in order to help people with those issues. So,
can I ask a question?
Yeah, what's up?
Do you think you, like, witnessing all that, like, guided you to make psychology as your major?
I think subconsciously, yeah, because I didn't understand any of it at first, because it was like, to me, it was just like he was acting like a kid, that he just wasn't maturing, and I just saw it as that. But I didn't really think about the whole psychological and even the chemical and hormonal things going on in someone's brain when something like that is happening, where it's almost like they can't develop beyond that point.
So at least I guess I could chime in.
Yeah.
Being an African American male as well.
I'm only the odd one out.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll get to you though. For me, growing up, at least, I could say, just trying to think, like, mental illness kind of just wasn't a thing growing up. You never really heard of it, or, at least your parents and, people prior, the elders never spoke on it. It was always a thing of, no one spoke on it until now, at least. So growing up, you didn't know. You just knew, you might see different people who, you would label as crazy. Like people, back in the day, they'll just say, oh, that person is crazy. But not realizing that, that person has a mental issue. Growing up, it wasn't a factor growing up, if you, now you can define it as depressed or anxiety and things like that. But growing up, if you were to say, oh, I'm depressed or I feel down and stuff like that, growing up in a black culture, at least, they would tell you, oh, you're being soft, or
Yeah.
or
Exactly.
if you come from a religious home, I heard this a million times, like, well, no, I ain't gonna say a religious home, but if a religious background, you always hear, oh, you just need to pray about it, but
Right.
it's beyond just religion, and it's more, it's a physical thing, so
And if I may, that stuff, those are like early indicators that someone may be dealing with a mental problem that they can't knock. And mental problems are much different than, say, like a physical problem. Those kind of things take time. Things eventually heal, or you can get treatment and stuff for that. But mental health is not something that just magically heals on its own.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of steps and a lot of understanding and a lot of progress in order for you to really recover from that. And when you're told as a kid that, like, you're dealing with this really heavy issue, but you're being told that you're being soft, that kind of messes up not only your worldview on yourself, but on other people. So when you get older and these things are more prevalent, like when you're in college and you can take the courses necessary to understand what's going on, you're just thinking in your head, like, I was told I was soft the entire time growing up, but, like, here are all these specific diagnoses for the things that I was going through, and you come back to your parents with that, and that can, like, ruin everything.
yeah.
Yeah, that can ruin your relationship with them. Be
Exactly.
Like, you ended up, like, kind of growing that, not really hatred, but just, like, anger towards them because, like, it feels like they just ignored your needs the whole entire time. And now that you know better and you know that, hey, I was struggling through all this and you kind of just pushed me aside as if I was the problem. So that kind of puts, like, things into perspective, too.
Yeah. Reflecting back on growing up, thinking about everything y'all just said, that's probably why I kind of had like a poor relationship with my parents growing up, and it wasn't until I graduated, got off on my own, got into psychology and learned more about the mind and how it works and stuff like that, and mental issues, and looking back and reflecting on how black culture kind of view mental illness. It kind of, I can say, learning those things improved my relationship with my parents, because a lot of the things that happened when I was a child, I can't really, I understood and got to a point where I understood that it wasn't their fault. It's kind of just how they were raised as well. So,
Yeah.
A lot of the things or habits your parents have come from how they was raised and taught. So if they was taught, you just need to pray about it, or, go play. You did this.
Play.
Yeah, go play or something. Then, they didn't. They,
Didn't understand.
they didn't understand. So they kind of, once they get kids, they kind of pass it off to their children. So
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of like a side topic, or it may be completely unrelated, but it's almost like the older you get, the more you actually know your parents, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because you go out in the world and you learn these things on your own, and it can be completely different from what your parents taught you. And then you come back to them with that sort of information, and it's like, oh, that's not true, or, yeah, this is how I feel. And as a kid, you just kind of follow in their footsteps, so you think what they're doing is always right, and not necessarily everything. Some things in the back of your head is like, that's not right, but that's mom or that's dad, and
Because you don't know any better. Like,
You don't
your
know
mom
any
and
better.
dad are the ones you look up to the most. So.
exactly. But once you start to have your own views on the world, it's like, sometimes it can be like, I've known you my whole life, and then it can be like, I don't even know who you are. It can be like that big of a difference. But that's just something on the side. I apologize.
I think I agree with that, and I personally have dealt with that. I guess throughout your life you change, and your parents have this viewpoint that they view you as a certain person, but then as you evolve throughout life, they start to think like, I don't even know who you are anymore. I've personally heard that from my parents. They have told me like, I don't even know who you are anymore. But in my head, I'm like, this is who I am. And then you can't really explain, like, you feel like something's wrong with you because you hear them say that. But then you're like, what exactly do you want me to be?
And that can sprout its own sort of mental health issues.
Yeah.
Because you start to feel
not enough.
It's almost like you're being fragmented into who you were and who you are, and your parents are basically telling you who you are isn't right, but it's your life experiences and the things that you've learned that brought you to who you are. And it's almost like they don't want to see their kid grow up or be different from what they want you to be.
Yeah.
That can cause its own mental health problems right there.
Yeah. And I think, personally, from what I've seen, I think it's harder for an African American men to state that they're dealing with mental issues, because especially being a man, they expect people expect men to be tough and, you know, not cry or not deal with their emotions or just put it aside. I'm gonna call you out right now because I'm with you every day and I care about you a lot. You don't like to talk about your feelings.
I just be chilling.
No, you don't talk about your feelings and you don't say anything about how you feel and you let that bottle up. That's what most guys do. I'm not saying it, like, that's just who you are, and I get that.
And it's not strictly an African American thing, although it is quite prevalent in the community.
Yeah.
It's a thing with all guys. It's just that you're raised with this sort of, you're a man, you don't need to complain and all that stuff, when it's okay to do that. And if you don't know how to do it in a healthy way when you're younger, that translates into when you're an adult. So when you actually deal with these stressful situations, you don't know what to do. You just
shut down.
You shut down emotionally, or you act violently because you just don't know what else to do.
Yeah, or you wait until, like, you get fed up with it and just blow up. And then at that point, you don't even know what you're mad about because there's so many things that, like, plays a part in why you're so angry. But you can't say what's wrong anymore. And, like, I've seen it happen at our work when boys cry. I've seen one of the workers, I'm not going to say any name, but one of the workers was like, "Stop crying, you're a boy. You don't cry."
Exactly.
And I hate to hear that because, like, just because you're a boy, that doesn't mean you cannot cry.
And, like, you grow up learning that, and, like, what if a close family member passes and then, like, everyone's crying and they're like, "Why aren't you crying?" And then again, everybody makes it seem like, it seems like when you were crying, they were against you, and then when you're not crying, they're against you in the future. Yeah. So it's like, what do I do? Like, what am I supposed to do? And I think ultimately, you just have to do what you feel is naturally right.
Yeah.
And you can't let too much of people's outside views affect that. Because if you do, then you don't become who you want to be. You become what other people want to be. And someone else can build your entire mental mainframe and you not really have a say in it yourself.
True. And I mean, it's hard to do that too. That plays along in who you hang out with.
Right.
With your friends, the relationship you're in. Just every person that's in your life plays a part in all of that.
Exactly.
Because if you are in, like, I guess, a toxic relationship where being with them, you change your whole you as a person just to please them. That's like a whole different topic, I guess. I don't know. But I feel like that plays a part in your mental health.
That's sort of an offshoot from mental health because relationships can change you psychologically. We've seen it happen. You start to lose parts of yourself to satisfy someone else.
I agree.
Or you become this different person to get the person that you want to be with. And in the end, you're just like, you're sort of pretending at first, like, I'm just going to go on with this charade for a while, but you're reworking your entire mental mainframe until you actually become that person that you were pretending to be to get that person. And then when it comes later down the line and you realize I'm really not this person, what are you going to do then? What if you're 5 years into a marriage and you realize that you've been playing this part for so long?
They get tired. And
you're torn between, do I continue to play the part or do I just be who I am?
Yeah.
So, culturally, we got to get back to you.
Oh, well, I guess I don't really know.
You know, you're the only Asian.
It's not all Asians because I don't hang out with Asians like that.
Well,
but
being from the Philippines.
Me as a person, like, personally, my experience in it, or from what I've witnessed, because I left the Philippines when I was really young. I was 8 years old. That's
You
young.
can reflect on that though.
Yeah, but I guess my culture, Filipinos are very, very close. When you go home, we talk. We love to talk. We love to talk about our feelings.
I can see that.
I talk to you about my feelings all the time and how,
And talk, period. But continue.
But, we just like to talk. We like to know how everyone is doing compared to when I moved to America, nobody really gave a care, you know? They didn't really care when you go home from school. Nobody asked, how was school? Nobody asked, how was your day today?
Yeah.
Nobody cares. It's like everybody just goes on with their life as if, everyone just goes on with their life, period. They don't stop and pause and just talk about how was your day, basically reflect. And I think that is a very, very key thing for your mental health. Reflect on your day. Reflect on how your day could have been better. Reflect, just reflection, period.
And this is also kind of an offshoot, but if you don't have an outlet to express those kind of things to anyone, then those kind of things get sorted out in your dreams. And your dreams are just it's like a stir fry of everything that's happened during your day or even during your week. And your dreams can interpret things that don't make sense or are completely different from what you actually experienced. But
Did you learn that in school?
What?
What you're saying right now? Like the dreams and all that stuff? Or no?
Well, yeah. And that's a personal assumption that I came to myself is that your dreams, because in your dreams things can seem normal, but then it'll be this one wild thing that just offsets it all. And personally, when I have dreams, it's either all wild and then one normal things happen, or it's all normal and then one wild thing happens. So I think that's my mind piecing different things together, but at different parts.
Yeah.
It's weird, but being able to have an outlet to talk about these, so it's already sort of resolved outside, and then coming to peace with it when you're asleep or when you're by yourself and thinking.
Yeah.
But if you don't really have an outlet to do that with, you don't know what to do with those kind of thoughts. You just don't.
Then how come? Can you explain this? When I was younger, before we after we moved to the U.S., whatever, I used to have dreams all the time. I get hit by a car. This is literally almost daily or weekly thing. That's the time where I didn't really talk to anybody how was my day and all that stuff. I literally had nobody to talk to.
Do you have car anxiety?
No, I like riding cars. So
you probably had a fear of when you were younger. At least had a fear of vehicles and stuff and getting in a car accident or getting hit by a car. Mainly getting hit by a car.
But the vehicle being hit by a car could also be some sort of symbolism. Maybe it's the culture shock of the U.S. that kind of hits you like a car.
Oh,
I
didn't think about that.
It's just.
But I even had that in middle school and stuff.
But I mean, compared to there and here, you probably see more cars and stuff on the road here than in the Philippines. No.
I mean,
there's a lot more over there.
Okay.
Of course, no names, but I worked with an Asian girl who, she's been in the U.S. for quite a while, and she still has culture shock things when she's exposed to maybe African American culture or Hispanic culture that still surprise her. So it doesn't really matter how long you've been in somewhere. It's just, it matters what kind of things you've experienced, because you can move over from Russia, but you're homeschooled your entire life.
True.
And you don't see anything else, and you may have it through social media and stuff, but having those real life interactions is
different.
It's key to developing your mind for where you're living.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is true.
So, here's a question for you guys. What do you think are some signs? How can you tell if someone is dealing with mental issues or mental illness? Put it that way.
Honestly, it's hard to state that because everybody has their down days. But when it comes, more, you see it more often than usual. Then the whole being quiet or just when the change in their behavior and their personality, you can see the flip switch real quick. You can see they used to be really happy and now they're always down or whatever. Or you can just tell whenever, if you know the person personally, you can tell when the happiness is now fake compared to a genuine happiness. You can see it in their face. You can hear it in their, laugh or how they talk. It's different now. I think that's one of the signs, and just, I guess, where they're at now.
Yeah.
They used to hang out with a lot of people now. Now they're all by themselves. I don't know, simple things like that, but you never really know.
People who tend to spend a lot of quiet time with themselves, usually in that quiet time, the only person that you have to talk to is yourself.
Yeah.
Which means you're the only filter that your thoughts are going through. So you may think to yourself, I don't know, I like hurting animals. And if no one tells you, hey, yo, that's not right. In your mind, you think that's right.
Yeah.
And if you keep spending that alone time with yourself, that thought keeps growing.
True.
And it becomes just normal and fine to you. But having an outlet to filter these things through is really good to have. So I think one of the biggest indicators of maybe like mental illness, depending on which one it is people who spend a lot of quiet time with themselves, especially as children, because children are naturally curious. They don't typically come to conclusions by themselves.
Yeah.
So they may ask a million questions, but that's to get a better understanding, so they don't have to think about that themselves. So,
and most parents kind of like, when the kids start doing that, they start pushing them aside because
exactly,
they think, oh, you're getting so annoying. I'm tired from work.
Right.
I'm tired of doing this. I'm not trying to answer all your questions.
And it's important to answer those questions.
Yeah.
So it kind of not only develops like their whole mental mind frame, but also their moral compass on like what's right and wrong. Because I've heard my little sister say some things,
Me too.
and my parents not address it, and then it's like, what? Did you just hear what she said, and you're not going to say anything about it? And then I have to step in and say something about it because I don't want her to say those things outside the home, and then her be under even more scrutiny than I would give her myself by her peers, and then she's ostracized in school, and that just makes her even more alone with her own thoughts.
Yeah.
And then if she's ostracized at school, she probably won't talk at home, and that it spirals downward.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't help either with social media and just like more people getting access to your life because, or pushing out certain image and how you should be either. Because like my little sister, she was 6 years old when she said, she's skinny, by the way. She's really skinny. She goes home and say, I'm fat. I don't like how I look. I don't like this. I don't like that. I'm ugly, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, who is telling you all this? She said, nobody's telling me all this. It's just how I feel because of what I see.
Yeah.
And I hate that because I feel like she starts to think no one's going to listen to her when she says that. Because it's a different thing for them because they have 2 homes and all that stuff. But it's just like, I feel bad because a 6-year-old should not be feeling that. A 6-year-old should be out playing right now and, living the best life. But since social media is out there and just, I don't know, the internet itself is, I feel like, harming mental health now, even more than before.
The internet really has no filter. You can find little corners of the internet where people justify the things that you think or justify the things that you do. And so long as you're in your little corner, you're fine with thinking those bad thoughts or feeling that way about yourself because you have people to support you.
Yeah.
And you can't really put a filter on the internet. You just kind of have to. I feel like the best way to approach the internet is to come at it with your own personal views before you allow the internet to manipulate what you think.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, they get it at a young age. Of course, nowadays they get it at a young age, and that's just kind of what they grow up with because they weren't able to come to that sort of understanding themselves.
That's why I think it's important for parents to, personally, I think it's important for parents to kind of always have a discussion with their kids about certain things and just life in general once they get a certain age. But because if they don't, then in the times we're living in now, technology is taking over. So if they don't raise their kids and tell them right from wrong and things that are the norm and things that's kind of that's just acceptable and isn't acceptable, then it's like the internet will, and the
Yeah.
internet will raise them. So, for example, just thinking about some stuff, musically now, a lot of the music today is wrapped around killing. So it's
Yeah.
kind of making killing the norm, like it's an okay thing. And
Mm-hmm.
kids, they don't really know no better. They just see
Yeah.
it, and they might think, oh, this is cool, whatever, 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 and then they think that, oh, killing is fine and stuff, and then if you're not, if a parent's not addressing these things in the future, once that kid gets older and they, keep getting exposed to this thing as being a norm, then, they may or may not grow up and then eventually end up, killing someone,
Yeah.
so.
And that plays a part in like the whole parenting too. You need to make sure that even though you can't blame music, you can't blame video games, you cannot blame anything for how your child grows up.
No.
It's all up to the parents.
I wouldn't say it's all up to the parent, but it's up to the home in general, or who you spend most of your time around.
Sure.
And that could be friends as well, because I've had mental shifts, not from the home, but some of my closest friends. And it just matters who's most important to you and how their opinion goes against what you think. I don't know if that sounds right.
I think it does.
But there's a lot of factors going into what your mental health will be, and I think that ultimately it's up to you to decide where's your moral compass. Where do you draw what's funny and what's not funny? What's fat and not fat? What's good and not bad, You kind of have to draw those lines yourself, and once you draw those lines, then I think you should talk to someone who can come kind of unbiasedly.
Which is hard to find.
Which is quite hard to find. That's why it's good to kind of expose yourself to different kinds of people, because you could be, you could be a drug dealer, and then you could have a friend who is in college to be a pastor.
Yeah.
And y'all have completely different worldviews, but y'all are still friends. And y'all can come to each other with different kind of things. And it's like, well, from my point of view, this is how I feel about it. And then with that, you kind of reshape your line on what's good or bad, or what's right and wrong and stuff like that. Having people in your life from different backgrounds and groups and stuff like that really helps you build your moral compass and your worldview, because you have so many different kind of perspectives to filter your own perspective through.
It's all just sitting here talking about all this stuff is very interesting, and it just makes you think even more.
Who really are the people in your life?
Yeah, that, and just reflecting on how we were growing up, and then now how the things that the kids are exposed to. Like, for me at least, I can say I was exposed to a lot young, but if I didn't have I grew up with a lot of elders in my life, and
You have an
who
old soul now.
whatever. But I had a lot of elders in my life who kind of taught me and showed me a lot, differently from what I realized from my friends and how they was growing up. And I just think about if I didn't have that, and let's say a lot of the stuff that seem okay and normal now, if those things was as strong as they are today back then, that there's no telling probably where I would be right now, especially mentally. I could possibly either be dead in jail, or just simply from all of it, just completely lost my mind probably.
Yeah, I think having all those elders in your life kind of helped you mature a little bit quicker than everybody else too.
And it's not just simply elders. It all, like, speaking now in today's time, it just depends on who you be around, and you have to use a little bit of personal instincts.
It's not necessarily age, but maturity level.
Yeah.
Because you can meet people that are 14, 15, 16 that talk like they're in their 20s or 30s.
Oh, yeah.
It just matters how that person matures. Because there's some old people who still,
Yeah.
you know, hold on to archaic thoughts that just don't work in this day and age. And just because they're your elder doesn't mean that they're right. They just have their own view. And that's
Yeah.
okay for you to have that view, but elders tend to impose their views on younger people. Like, this is what's right. This is how it was then, so it's still like that now.
Yeah.
When the world, just like your mind, is dynamic.
Yeah. But I feel like you still can, with all the people that you meet throughout your life, you can pull knowledge from every
of course.
single person that you meet. It all depends on what you pull.
It, as you should. I think that everyone you encounter, like a genuine connection,
Yeah.
you should pull something from that person to put into your own personality. Not your personality, but sort of like your worldview. Even if it's a bad thing, like you pull that into your mind and you think, okay, I understand that that's bad and that's not what I want in my life.
That helps you like mold on who you are. Because
Exactly.
there's really now no age to where you stop learning. Because you can
never
be,
stop learning.
No, you
Never
can't.
stop learning.
And you never stop changing as a person. You could be something at 29 and be a completely different person by 30. It all depends on what you are exposed to in that 1 year time frame.
And sort of doubling back to mental illness, some people whose minds are that scrambled
Yeah.
don't learn anymore.
No.
They don't grow any more moral. They don't become more moral. They don't change the way that they think. Like, they are who they are, and that's what they think of the world. And that's hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be around people like that. And I'm sure that most of the people who are like that know that, unless they have like a degenerative disease like Alzheimer's. Like, most of them know that I think very much differently from the world, and I'm really not a part of it. And usually the people who think like that are the ones who do the bad things.
Yeah.
Because they don't sympathize with, quote, normal people. They have their own skewed worldview that won't change, and that's that.
But do you think, even if they are the way they are now, do you think if they found somebody that they can talk to about, the stuff they're going through and just the stuff that they're thinking about, do you think it would help them a little bit more to kind of pull out of that?
I think that is certainly possible, but it depends on how early you catch it. If you catch it, like, when they're relatively young, then I think that with enough effort and, conversation and even medication in some cases, that you can pull some of that out of a person where they may still have those thoughts, but they don't think of them on as grand of a scale as they did before. It sort of like tames them and tames their thoughts. But usually once people hit a certain age, and it sometimes it's not even a certain age, it's just when they decide that is their point, it's hard to bring them back from it. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's hard to bring them back.
We have a couple friends that are like that.
Exactly.
They're very stuck in their ways.
And it's not even like it's necessarily on the deep end of deep mental health issues. It could be, this is how I feel about
things.
Shirts, and that's that.
Yeah.
It could be things like that, and like they're set in what they think, and that's that. Like, you can't tell them anything different. You could bring facts to them, and they're just like, nope, that's what I think. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And another question for, I guess, both of you. Like, with the whole mental illness thing, you know how they prescribe medication and all that. Do you think that sometimes people take advantage of that?
Yes.
Like, take advantage of people with mental health issues?
I guess that, and then, like, take advantage of the fact that, I guess,
I
don't know, you can't really fake.
Are you speaking of, like,
them trying
people abusing, saying that they have mental problems and just to get these different prescriptions and drugs?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But do you think that plays a role in why some people are kind of like, pushy about the whole, are you sure you have mental illness?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
you like,
You're right, because even now recently, it seems like depression is more of a trend than an actual medical condition. Yeah. Like, you'll see a meme where it's like, my depressed self, or, insert the word, but, like...
It becomes a meme.
Yeah. and people out here, dealing with these issues deep down, and people on the internet making it into a joke, and that not only makes it harder for them to speak out about their depression, but it pushes them deeper into it because they feel isolated.
Yeah.
It could be one of your closest friends, and they're on Facebook sharing the meme about that, and it's like, you're not depressed. You spilt your coffee. That doesn't make you depressed.
Yeah.
That makes you maybe angry or sad, but depression, that's an entirely different realm of emotion that a lot of people have never experienced.
Do you think also, like, how people are dealing with depression, but they're also sharing these type of memes to hide behind it? That way, no one's really looking at them and pointing them out, making sure, because they don't want to attract that type of attention.
Yeah. I think so, yeah, because a lot of people, they don't want to, like, a lot of people are not comfortable with speaking out. I was a person once upon a time like that, so.
You still are.
Yeah, but I'm talking about,
You're a little bit better now.
Yeah, he's gotten better.
But
you've known him longer than I have, and so you can see him evolving.
Come on, that's all right. But, a lot of people, they're not comfortable with speaking out, or if they speak out, they feel like they may be judged, or, depending on who their inner circle is, their friends might, kind of get on them and think that you're not, like he said, you're not depressed, you're just, whatever. So, I feel like they do things like that to kind of express, like, hey, I'm feeling like this, how do y'all respond, or what should I do?
True.
Without kind of saying it,
I think, honestly, everyone wears some sort of mask.
Yeah.
Everyone has maybe one part about themselves that they don't want people to know about, that you may not feel insecure about internally, but you don't know how other people are going to react to the way that you feel. So you kind of shield yourself. And I think in some cases that's okay. Because it's not that you're afraid to admit that that's who you are, but it's just sort of something that you'd rather keep to yourself. And I think everyone's afforded a little bit of privacy. But when you have what's the word I'm looking for? When you have a malicious sort of thought process, like you have deep hate and racial thoughts, like that's not something that you should keep to yourself. That's something that you should tell people up front, because that's like a very much a core part of yourself that you can't hide forever.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a deeply racist person, you can't work at a job with different ethnicities and just keep it on the wraps. Like, eventually,
it's gonna come out.
It's gonna come out. It's gonna, and it racism is just like that's an example, but it could be little things. Like, you could be in a club where all they talk about is basketball, but you hate basketball with a passion, but you're in that club to make friends, to fit in. And then, like, when it gets to a serious conversation about basketball, you're like, man, I don't even like basketball. Like, I hate the sport. And then it's like, so you've been doing this the whole time. And I don't know who you are. Like, what? You've flown under the radar this long, and now here you are, and it's like, I don't even know you.
I think that happens a lot. We wear a mask because we don't want people to think we're weak.
Exactly.
Because that's you accepting the fact that you have to deal with mental stuff and mental issues within yourself is very difficult to admit, because it's a very, very vulnerable part of you. And it's hard to share that with people. That's why you have to put on this facade that everything's okay, you're happy, nothing's wrong, and it's more difficult to detect that something's up.
And honestly, when it comes to certain thoughts, the only person that you really have to convince that it's right is yourself.
Yeah.
And once you've convinced yourself that it's right, sometimes it doesn't even matter what anyone else thinks.
Yep.
And that comes to the whole talking to people about things, because if you kind of keep this thought to you private the whole time, then you're never told that it's wrong. So it builds into your mind that this is right.
Yeah.
So you could go your whole life hating basketball, but not really telling anybody. Even if it doesn't come up in conversation, or like maybe people are talking about sports when nobody brings up basketball, and you choose to kind of stay out of the conversation. But like when you get later in life, you're just always in that mind frame of basketball is stupid.
Yeah.
It's a dumb sport. I don't get why people play it. And in some cases that can alienate people from you.
Yeah.
Even if it's a mutual place like work, you could alienate coworkers from you because of how strong of a view you have on something that you may not have personally experienced yourself or even gave the opportunity to watch it. That's just the kind of thought that you've always had. But because you never exposed yourself to it, because that's the thought that you had, it becomes a permanent, not a permanent part of you, but a hard part of your core.
Yeah. All that plays a part, though. Like, I guess your mindset kind of pushes people away. And I don't know.
So, I have one more question for y'all. All right. So, do y'all think that there's a way to prevent mental illness? Is there a prevention for it?
Go ahead. I personally don't think so. I think there's never ending it.
I don't think that there's a way that you can prevent it, but I think there's a way that it can be managed and it can be controlled, or it can be diminished to the point where it could still be a problem, but it's not a big enough problem to cause harm to yourself or to others.
Like, your mental illness is not the one controlling you. You're in control of you.
Yeah. You have to find power not only over your mental illness, but like you kind of have to control your entire self, because usually people with mental illness they typically don't think something's wrong with them. They just think that's how they are. Some of them, and it takes a lot to admit that something is wrong with you, but nobody ever really wants to be wrong.
No.
So you have to be real with yourself first before you can really conquer whatever's going on in your head. So I don't think it's entirely preventable, but I think that if people have the right resources and the drive to do it, they can keep it in check and make it almost non-existent.
I agree. I don't think it's something that's preventable. It's always going to be a thing, because the mind is a powerful thing, and the world is changing every day, and you're exposed to so much that mentally you're going to feel, just emotionally and hormone based, everything like that.
Yeah.
Makeup of the human body. You're gonna be exposed to many different feelings, and there's gonna be things that happen throughout life that's gonna have you sad, depressed,
mad,
mad, different emotions, to where your mind is going to overthink a lot of times, I like to say. But it's all about, you can manage it. You have to have that self-control. If there's a problem, don't be afraid to speak out. Just speak to someone, if you feel comfortable with personally to speak to, or just different ways to kind of just release that. Even if you're not really a big speaker, you can find different ways to different outlets, and to express yourself, whether it's through poetry, through music, playing the game. Just talking to yourself, Some people think, if you talking to yourself, you're crazy, but it's, ain't nothing wrong with talking to yourself.
As long as you're responding to yourself.
Yeah, as long as you're responding to yourself. Nothing wrong with talking to yourself.
As long as you get
start
it out.
responding,
Don't have a conversation with yourself.
because then it's at that point where you got to realize, okay, something's wrong, because I'm responding to myself, so.
I respond to myself.
We got to get you checked then.
But, like, I think the whole having the right resources is really key into helping you deal through mental illness. Like, I overthink a lot of stuff. Simple little things, like, certain stuff triggers me to where I just start overthinking the whole what if this, what if that, what if this, blah, 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 and it just eats me up inside until I start crying. Out of nowhere, literally, like, you just be sitting down and you just start thinking, and all this stuff comes rushing through your head, and you start crying. At least for me, that's how I am. And you cannot explain what's wrong. All you can do is cry, because all this stuff is going through your mind, but you can't pinpoint the exact reason of that emotion you're feeling. Or you just start to get angry and start, I do this with you, I just start hitting you. Because like
abuse.
It's not like that. I don't hit.
I just play. Come on.
But just like you start to get all that emotion out, but you still cannot pinpoint why you feel that way, and that's an issue.
It's important to deal with things as they come because they do build up.
Yeah.
And you may think, oh, that's not a big deal. I'm just going to shrug it off. But if it happens 5, 6, 7 times, is it really that big of a deal? And then you start to think back and think, I should have did this back then. I should have thought this back then. And then you end up, it's almost like a train wreck of thoughts and emotions because you don't know where the wreck starts or where it ends or why it even happened. You just know that there's a wreck.
Yeah.
You know? So dealing with things as they come is really important because things can mount up in your mind really quick. And it doesn't even take 5 or 6 times. It could take 2 or 3 times. And then you just don't know.
And it takes little events throughout the day or just little things you see or pass or hear that triggers that emotion, and then you just shut down. And you're like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to hear what you have to say because this is what I'm feeling and thinking now. And the more you talk and the more you say something, you're just going to, what's it called? Make it worse. I guess. So, all that stuff.
And speaking of when you said about resources, I feel like now that mental health is becoming more of an aware thing and people are learning about it more, I feel like there should be more, like you said, resources out there for people for mental health because if you think about it, besides technology, of course, you don't really hear anyone speak on it or, I'm dealing with these issues, but where can I go to deal with these stuff? And something I was just sitting here thinking about was, which is kind of, it's along the same lines, but it's kind of like a different topic, but just thinking about people in the military and people who may have done something that led them to jail and that, managed to come home. Speaking of starting with people in the military, I feel like a lot of them, especially that have been to war, they kind of, like, let's say if they get injured or something and they get honorably discharged. Yeah. It's kind of like not to really too much bash the military, but I feel like they don't have, like, they go through all this stuff and then when they come home, it's just like they're supposed to be okay to live a normal life. And a lot of times, a lot of them have a lot of issues like PTSD and stuff. So there's no resources, no help for them, and a lot of times they really do need it. And for people who go to jails, prison, I'm pretty sure that they witness or see a lot because if you're a male, you're in there with a bunch of guys. If you're female, you're in there with a bunch of females. And there's different things. There's different emotions, different hormones. Just for guys, there's a lot of testosterone. So I'm sure you're exposed to a lot of things that prior, depending on whatever you went to jail for, prior that you wasn't exposed to in the world prior to going to jail. So once you come home, it's kind of like the same thing with the military almost. It's like they release you and they don't think about what you may have witnessed or dealt with inside, so they kind of just expect you to come back into the world and be okay, when a lot of the times, a lot of people that end up going to jail, they have a lot of mental issues and they just simply need help. And a lot of times, depending on their background, it's like I see it as a lot of people who do crimes, especially if it's something as normal people consider to be dumb, it's more of a mental thing. And it's kind of like they're crying out for help, but they're not getting the help. So I feel like there should be more resources. Technology is good. Technology is a big platform to spread these resources, but I feel like there should be facilities and stuff like that. Because if you're older and you're not with the times of technology, then you're not gonna know. So
it's funny you mentioned that thing about crime, because there was an episode of Criminal Minds like that where it was this kid who he had the same kind of thoughts about the type of victim the serial killer was killing, but he wasn't the killer, but he was kind of helping the FBI profile the serial killer because he was the same way, and he wanted to know whether or not he was going to turn out to be a bad guy like him.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it was shocking to see because it's like the whole episode he's thinking of himself as this like monster,
Yeah.
like, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. He's tried different things, he just doesn't know how to deal with it, and he's torn between just living life as he is with that kind of thought process, ending his life, or deciding to try to get treatment for it. And it was a really powerful episode because usually people who commit crimes like that, it's almost like a cry for help. Clearly something is wrong with me. Can you see that something is wrong with me? It's a cry for help.
That's usually the whole issue, or the, what's it called? Like, their issues within themselves manifest, and then nobody deals with it, and nobody listens to the person to where they have to show that they're hurting. But it ends up, putting them in a really bad spot to make that decision. So I don't know. Everything plays a part in the reason why they're doing that stuff. And then like the whole resource thing too. I think it's a lot more difficult for people that have committed crime to get mental health help, because people think, oh, you have a background, you're already a bad guy. They don't give quote unquote criminals second chances. They have that mindset that you are the way you are, there's no changing you. So they don't provide those resources. And then another thing too, like people who are dealing in the poverty area, they don't have those resources, which is also difficult. Everything plays a part.
Yeah, it does.
Basically.
And I feel like, I can speak, personally, I have a connection with, people in the jail system, coming home, stuff like that, because of family members and stuff. But I just think about, ultimately I feel like the moment you kind of enter inside of a jail, or for whatever reason, it's kind of like you're in a way shunned by the world, because honestly, it doesn't even matter what you get a record on. It's just like the moment you get a record, it's like jobs kind of start looking at you different, depending on what your record is for. Of course, people start looking at you different, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of times I feel like that's what plays a part into crimes, because it's like you can go to jail for something. Like, let's say a killer. He goes to jail for killing someone, and, he spends his 20 years, 15 years, whatever he gets, depending on the situation, of course. And he comes home, and inside of that jail, he finds himself, he changes, but he comes home, he's a better person, a better man, but he's forever staying with that on his record as being a killer, so people's going to judge him, jobs going to look at him different. So I feel like a lot of times, even if he come home, a changed person, a lot of times he'll end up falling back in the same ways and end up back in the system, because he ends up falling back into the system because how I'm trying to put it, he ends up falling back into the system because he
has no help.
We actually learned about something like that in my criminology class, where the criminal is labeled that way. I think it's called labeling theory, actually, where when you do something, as far as society is concerned, that's what you are for the rest of your life. Be it a thief, a murderer, a rapist, whatever it is, that's what society's going to view you. That's the kind of lens society's going to view you through, and there's almost no changing that. And it's even worse when you're an adult, because you could have done something when you were 18 and now you've been in jail for 15, like you said, 15, 20 years, and you can come out a completely different person, seeing the error of your ways and all that stuff, but you're still going to be labeled as that when you come out. On your job application, they're going to see that on your record, and they're automatically going to think, oh, that's who this person is. And precedent is not a bad thing to judge someone off of, but I think it's also important to give people opportunities to show you who they are now to really, before you really make a decision about what you think about them.
Because a lot of jobs don't even take people like that. Like, especially, like, say if you get charged for drug cases and stuff, like, the only type of jobs that'll probably hire you is McDonald's, plant jobs, stuff like that. And a lot of the times, a lot of guys like that end up doing the same thing and going back to jail because, let's be honest, you're slaving yourself and that's no real money. You can't live off a minimum wage. So, a lot of them just feel like, you know what, I tried to do the right thing, but I'm being shunned by the world. I can't get a good job to provide for my family. So I know that doing this, I was making money. So I'm going to go back to doing this. And, those mental issues start coming again. And, you end up back in the same situation. So it's like a repeating pattern. So I mean, that's ultimately, y'all have anything else? I think this was a great and powerful episode.
Yeah, I think it was good. I think we covered a lot of things and gave our personal insights, which I think the people really want is how we feel about things, because maybe someone's feeling the same way, and it's important to
voice that out.
Yeah, to voice that and have people to relate to.
To know that you're not the only one dealing with mental issues or mental health issues, that you're not alone in the battle.
You're not alone.
There's a lot of people out there that are probably dealing the same thing that you are. They might be like you, that's scared to talk about it or, voice how they're feeling. If, we want this platform to be that type of platform to where you say how you feel with no judgment. It's a judgment-free zone. If you are going through some things, there's places or phone numbers you can call, basically.
Yeah, I think that's just, I don't know, I think that's, unless if y'all don't have anything else, I think that's everything.
I think that's good.
So, social media handle, you want to throw that out? Snapchat?
No. Hold on. I think I'm good.
Good. Y'all good. All right. So, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Joining Conversation Podcast. We have more topics on the way. Definitely a big thank you to our special guest, my psychology brethren. We got more on the way, like I said. We are your hosts. My name is Tristan.
My name is Kimmy.
And we'll catch you.
And this is T. Thanks for having me, guys.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of Join the Conversation Podcast.
If you or someone you know is in a crisis now, please seek help immediately. Call 1-800-273-8225 to reach a 24-hour crisis center or dial 911 for immediate assistance.